In this episode, I talk to my good friend Donald Clarke about mixed martial arts, the Wim Hoff method, ice baths, psychotherapy, psychedelics, Vipassana meditation, and integral theory. Donald Clarke, welcome. You are the first guest on my podcast, and you're a nice guest to have because we've been good friends for I don't know, like 12 years maybe or something like that.
It's in the decade span at least.
Yeah. So, you know, we know each other pretty well, and we've kind of bonded around these practices. So the first question I want to ask is, when did you realize that taking this multidisciplinary approach to transformational practices was the right way to go? You know, I imagine you've been doing things for a long time. I mean, I know you've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for, you know, since you were a kid and stuff like that, but there must have come a point where you thought, feel like I'm becoming a bit lopsided and I need to plug in some different practices to make myself more whole. You know, could you describe that story?
That's quite interesting in the sense that prior to that discovery, I feel I was doing practices like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu primarily as a physical practice, but the whole school of inner work and development and personal growth and so on was something I really kind of just saw at Foyle's bookshop on the self-help guide, really.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, I wouldn't have considered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu part of that whole thing. That was like, you know, I just really wanted to get good at that particular sport, and there was a lot of ego invested in it and a lot of youthful sort of testosterone there and so on. I just wanted to be really good. But in hindsight, I could say, that was personal development. But I wouldn't have considered that. The whole personal development aspect and the integral aspect of that came at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had just finished closing down a business that I'd been running in my late 20s, and I was kind of lost and had nothing really going on. And I was with my guitar teacher, and he mentioned two things to me. He said, there's this really cool thing called Vipassana, and you should check it out. And there's this book I'm reading by a guy called Ken Wilber. And that was a book called Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality. And so on the way to Vipassana, I was reading this book, Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality. And this was the first time that I was going to do anything like meditation or spiritual work in that sense. I always had a sort of intellectual curiosity, but I'd never done any practices like that. And I wasn't supposed to read in Vipassana, but I couldn't put this book down. I couldn't put it down. It was like I tried to kind of read other spiritual books and so on, but this one seemed like the engineering manual of spiritual practices in a way. And this was sort of this was my first proper spiritual practice.
So was that like a 10-day?
Yeah, 10-day Vipassana retreat. Yeah.
Was it in Hereford?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in Duppademon here. Yeah, I've been to that one.
I did a 10-day one at the same place.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that retreat was absolutely awesome. It
Hmm.
was. I mean,
So just describe, in case someone doesn't know what Vipassana retreat is.
yeah, yeah.
Just say what was the retreat?
So the retreat itself was it was an instruction on meditation for 10 days. The whole format revolved around doing a very particular technique that's gradually introduced over the course of about 5 days, and sitting and speaking in silence. So there's no speaking to anybody. There's no staring in the eyes of other people. Like social contact is so limited, and you're really just with yourself in this really quiet place in Hereford. Um, so yeah, the practice itself is led by a guy called Goenka, and it's done on video. And yeah, you just follow it for the 10 days, and wait and see what happens, basically.
And it's like 10 hours a day, pretty
Yeah,
much, of sitting for 10 days.
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah, sitting, waking up at 4 in the morning, meditating, then going for breakfast, then meditating. And yeah, so it was a pretty hardcore introduction.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's your style, isn't it? You
Yeah,
jump in the deep end straight away.
yeah, yeah. I think so. Sometimes to my detriment.
Yeah.
But in this case, this was a good thing. I really got on board with it. I'm not sure I would have been able to follow a typical meditative practice, 20 minutes a day, um, kind of over the course of a year and so on. I kind of needed to know if this was real or not quite quick.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and yeah, I I experienced something really profound in that place.
Yeah. So what were the, if you were to sort of say a handful of things you took away from that experience, what would it be?
Well, it 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 completely changed my actually I wouldn't say completely changed. It set the first inkling of doubt as to the materialistic nature of reality, of the world that we occupy, that we are. And I mean, I had a strong experience of my identity just falling away. And when it happened, I had no language or framework for it. I had
Mm.
Nobody had spoken to me about this. I didn't read anything about this before. Um, and when I went to ask the teachers and Vipassana, they kind of didn't have much answers either. Um, so I was left with a really profound question: what is the nature of self? And having experienced myself just drop away, head disappeared, and then I disappeared, but I was still present. And
Mm-hmm.
um, for a guy who kind of saw things pretty much as as an engineering diagram. I was a coder back then, and
Mm-hmm.
my father was an engineer. My father's father was an engineer. It's like there was nothing really to prepare me for that. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
Consciousness is it doesn't really have those kind of moving parts like a machine does.
no,
It's quite
not
yeah.
yeah,
And so much of consciousness doesn't have this sort of simple location
yeah,
thing, which the more, sort of machine type stuff,
yeah.
objects like that have.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It. so it opened a light bulb, and I had a qualitatively different dimension to explore now. I think prior to that, any sort of self-development work I was doing might have been more geared towards something like neuro-linguistic programming, or
Mm-hmm.
those sort of CBT style things, and Tony Robbins, and sort of a
Yeah.
very modernistic
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And and this was a very different dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it didn't even have anything to do with the way I was thinking or what I was thinking and feeling. It went just below the surface of all those things.
Yeah.
Um, Now, fortunately, I did have Ken Wilber's book at that time.
You sneaky, like because you're not supposed to read, are you?
No, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to.
And I'm sure people would grass you up if they saw you.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not even supposed to do any exercise. I mean, you can walk, but I mean, when I was there, I was desperate to do some push-ups and, squats and things. But
yeah, yeah.
no, you
I
were
mean,
not. It was very strict like that.
yeah, yeah. No, it was completely, especially back then. I mean, that was like for me 13 years ago now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, especially back then. But I kind of stuck with the whole no physical exercise, no other practices,
Yeah.
nothing like that. But
Sneaking off to the toilet to read your Ken Wilber book.
yeah, yeah, all of that, man. Well, the thing is, fortunately, my roommate, you kind of assigned a room and usually share it. I don't know if that was your experience.
Yeah, 4 of us, I think.
Yeah. Well, he didn't make it. He kind of made it for like 4 days and then
Ah,
just went. He just disappeared, never
yeah.
came back. And they never replaced him with anybody. So I sort of had that room to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Convenient.
yeah, yeah, it was really convenient. Yeah. And Ken, well, that book, I when I had that experience, there was all of this terminology like the causal, the subtle, the gross, the non-dual, formless, formlessness. A lot of terminology there, a lot of language was there, just for this fresh mind to sort of hook onto in a way.
Mm, yeah.
And so I'm very grateful that something in me decided to bring that book and
Yeah.
everything, because it sort of set my path in a way.
So interesting how so this podcast is themed around practices of body, heart, mind, and spirit, and how to integrate them into one holistic, multidisciplinary lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so you've gone pretty quickly from mainly doing a body-based practice, your Brazilian jiu-jitsu,
Mhm.
to somebody gives you this book, you start reading it, suddenly you're encountering this whole new mental territory with your mind, this new theory, which is opening up that whole side of things. And then you're at the same time doing this introduction to sort of a spiritual meditation practice.
Yeah.
So that's all happening pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really quick, really
Mm.
quick. Like from the time I got that book to the time I went to the Vipassana retreat was literally about a week.
Right.
And yeah, and prior to that, hadn't heard of Ken Wilber or his whole philosophy or integral practice. And but the framework was in a sense not unfamiliar. In the sense, there was a post that you wrote on one of the Facebook forums. It was comparing spiritual practice to training in MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to all of this, I was having similar thoughts around why hasn't science, for instance, become as integral as, let's say, mixed martial arts. Like the interdisciplinary integration of science, engineering, and all these things, they hadn't evolved at that time as far as something like martial arts. Um, and so when I kind of got to this book, I'd already done almost 9, 10 years of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
But
And
it's interesting that one of the things mainstream media things that I've noticed, which is what I would consider integrating these multidisciplinary approaches, is Joe Rogan's podcast, which started
yeah,
in 2009. He does a lot of different stuff, but he does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He
yeah,
commentates for the fights in the Octagon, the Ultimate Fighting Championships,
yeah, yeah,
and I've really enjoyed his podcast, and it's incredibly popular, which
yeah, yeah,
kind of is linking in with this theme. This is what's kind of up next, really, in our culture, I feel, and I
yeah,
think his podcast is like the sort of mainstream figurehead for that, and
yeah,
and it
yeah,
and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very much linked to it, and I think it's interesting that you came out of that discipline of this mixed martial arts thing,
yeah,
which that's kind of baked into it, and there's a real appreciation of how different pure streams of practice can coalesce into something that's new. This, because MMA is a new thing, it's
yeah,
in
yeah.
our lifetimes it's happened.
That's the thing. Yeah, yeah. And a completely multidisciplinary practice. And I mean, when MMA started, I remember watching it in 1995, and it was purely then just this martial art versus that martial art and so on. And so about 5 years later or so, I decided to go and learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was in a small community of people who were the first mixed martial artists in England.
Cool.
It's yeah. Some of them even went up to UFC and whatnot. So I
Wow.
was in that environment, and um, throughout my sort of time in jiu-jitsu, I was training other mixed martial artists in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and so on. So that whole sort of the whole kind of concept around it, around kind of mixing different things and seeing what comes out, but doing it in a way that is very rational, like you couldn't really have mixed martial arts until you had Brazilian jiu-jitsu, really. And this was sort of like the glue that kind of held everything together.
Mm.
um, it has a particular hierarchy in the whole scheme of things. It's not like the highest of the things, I would call that striking, really, but it's it is integral to all the other arts kind of forming around it. Without it, then you can't do anything in mixed martial arts. You'd just be
Right.
submitted very easily.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing, sorry.
Yeah. Well, you were reading the book
Yeah,
somewhere in some cupboard somewhere in your bedroom in Vipassana.
yeah,
Yeah.
in the Vipassana and so on, and the the way that this guy was sort of breaking things down, the way that Ken was breaking things down into quadrants, and then assigning different practices into those quadrants and so on. Well, that made sense to my sort of my background as a programmer, my background in computers, and kind of categorizing things and putting them into their right boxes and all of this stuff.
Could you just say something about the quadrants for people that don't know?
Yeah, yeah. So in Wilber's model, there are four quadrants: the I, the we, the it, and the its, and so on. And the I is more about our personal selves, our beingness, in a way. And the we is our relation to each other, how we show up with each other in the world, basically the intersubjective experience of culture. And so what are the symbols and things that we share with each other that make up culture at large? And the it aspect is basically just the objects that reside in culture. So they could be sort of um, the descriptions of plants, animals, what makes up a bank, what makes up an economic system, the investigations that we use to uncover the categorizations that we kind of see around the world. And then we have the its, which are the systems. So those would be the actual economic systems, the systems that we use, the objective systems that we use in the world.
Like the internet.
Yeah, the
public
internet,
transport.
public transport. Yeah.
So everything can be kind of fitted into one of these four quadrants.
Yeah.
Anything in life you could kind of sort out like that.
Yeah, you could kind of categorize them, place them into this particular thing. It's I think there was a way he broke it down. Was it science, art, and politics, or something like this? The I, we, the it.
Yeah. Okay. So and that appealed to your mind as a coder.
So yeah, that appealed to me as a technical person.
Okay. Yeah. Technical person.
Yeah. And I think prior to that, kind of, if reading spiritual texts and so on, or even just sort of self-help texts that had a very spiritual slant, at the time they were highlighting things that things to do with the heart, things to do with my emotions, things to do with all this stuff that at that time I just wasn't ready for that language. I wasn't. I was almost off-put by that sort of language, to be honest. So having this guy Ken come along and then kind of say, well, we can look at this in this sort of rational way. And
I think that's one of the great things about his work, for example, and a lot of this work that's associated with the integral movement is you can approach it with a technical mind. You could approach it with a very artistic mind. You could approach it with this kind of very spiritual mind, or a very body-based approach, and it will make sense to all of those people. Whereas what you were saying, that if you, what's that saying, woo-woo, it's Americanism. I mean, we're both English, but we don't really use woo-woo, but I've heard it around. It's this kind of more kind of I mean, I'm a hippie. I think of myself as a hippie quite a lot of the time, so I'm not saying this in a pejorative way, but the kind of sort of more hippie side of spirituality is a big turn off to people that are tech people. And so that's really interesting that was the angle that you went into it, because I came from it slightly from the more artistic end of things, but had a similar experience to you. It's really interesting to see the parallel there, but we came at it from a different angle.
From different angles, but came into it regardless.
Nonetheless, sucked us in like some tractor beam. Okay. So keep going.
So I think for me the experience, this experience I had in the Vipassana, this loss of identity, of like my sort of egoic self, and then having this right next to me, this really massive book. I don't know if you've ever seen Sex Ecology.
Oh, I've read it. Yeah, I took it to India with me one time. It's about 900 pages or something.
It's a massive book.
Yeah.
It's a massive book. But yeah, having this like massive book that I considered to be the source of all wisdom. Um,
Yeah, like a new convert with all the zeal
yeah, yeah,
of someone who's just encountered something exciting. Yeah.
exactly. You know, both on a sort of intellectual level and an experiential level.
Hmm.
So on having those two kind of meet up. Um, After that, I came back to London and I kept on having these, for times, these non-dual experiences. And well, actually, they weren't really non-dual. They were experiences of, I would just call them like a slipping away of identity into what I'd probably now call emptiness or formlessness.
Hmm.
And I and I kind of thought, well, I should really explore this. But not necessarily just from reading books and so on. I should try and go out and find community and other people, and see what this is about. And so obviously, I came across the uh, the fact that sex ecology and spirituality was a philosophy book or an anthropological book first and foremost, but it was really good to discover that there was a whole set of practices that people were doing around this thing. Because I kind of thought, in the Vipassana place, that I'm just going to be on my own trying to make sense of this thing with this book.
Yeah, because they don't give you a lot. They don't give you anything at this Vipassana. I mean, it's like you go and you could go the whole way without talking to a single person, which is what I
Yeah,
did. Um, but if you go to speak to one of the teachers, they don't really give you a lot of help. It's and the instructions are delivered by a video recording of
yeah,
Goenka. I mean, he's dead, isn't he?
yeah. He's
Yeah.
dead. Yeah,
So it's this like dead guy talking stuff that you can't ask him questions, and you are
yeah,
really on
yeah.
your own. I won't go into it here, but I've got quite a lot of criticisms of the Vipassana retreats
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we went on. I mean, that you get very powerful experiences, but that's for another
Yeah,
conversation.
that's another
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I didn't at the time have much criticism of it. I just didn't know much. I went on 3 retreats later on, but yeah, now I would probably say there's um a lot of improvement to
Mhm.
be made in that area of things. Um but yeah, I came back from the Vipassana
Yeah.
and not having much sort of not knowing any much more than I did when I was there. So I decided to join like these little Vipassana sort of hangouts. Somebody would have a shed and they would go and sit, and I thought, well, if I could get into that community, perhaps it would shed some more light. They would know more than me, and so on. But there was this general sort of sense of a type of elitism around the practice. So it sort of meant, if you asked too many questions, what was kind of given back to you was just keep on doing the practice. There's nothing more to be said. Just keep on doing it, and so
Right.
on. And and if you kind of spoke about other things that you were doing and so on, that would be kind of frowned upon.
Yeah.
And
So that's what we would be describing as a partial approach. That
yeah,
that so like you were getting the whiff, the scent coming off this Vipassana group was okay. We're onto something here. Everybody else is wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Like if they just did this Vipassana practice, everything in the world would be sorted. Um,
That's the thing.
and I think when you've got the integrating impulse, like you and I have, you get a whiff of that and you're like, that's not the smell of roses, man. That's the smell of shit.
Yeah, that's the smell of shit, and there's nothing growing from that dung. You know,
Yeah.
it's it flew in the face of just my own kind of experience with jujitsu, where it was like it would have been easy for the jujitsu community to say we're the most dominant martial art that the world has ever seen, da da da. And there was a bit of that, I've got to say, but there was this really strong openness to having other martial artists come and train and so on, and sort of, you know, it helped to open up this multidisciplinary thing. So that was in my body, you know, that was something that was sort of conditioned into me from early on, and you know, kind of being in a community that was so close-minded to just the intellectual notion that you could do other things and that things might be complementary, things might not be complementary, but we could try. It felt wrong.
Yeah.
It just felt wrong.
But yeah, I mean, but to you know, to also say we are not, we both love meditation. You know, that's a practice that you encountered, that practice through the Vipassana door,
The Vipassana,
and then you took your meditation practice out of the Vipassana tradition into what, you know, we'll talk about that later, but you know, whatever type of meditation you're doing nowadays is not, I mean, probably has integrated a lot of the lessons you learn through the Vipassana stuff, but it's what you do does not fit inside that container anymore.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I feel that Vipassana as a practice is great, and it was a great introduction to this whole thing. I think it's just more so than just the practice, or more so than the practice, which I have no criticism of really. It's sort of just the mindset around these things, and you kind of see it in yoga as well, and you know, you see it in many things. Even in sort of the martial arts, that was the kind of status quo. You know, my karate will beat your karate. In science, you know, it's like if you're not studying physics, you're studying a second-rate science.
Oh yeah,
you know?
they call it, what's it, physics envy.
Yeah, physics envy and so on, you know. It's something that humans do basically, but
it's tribalism, basically, isn't it? And you know, there's all sorts of positive aspects to tribalism in this kind of strong cohesion of small groups of people, and that's really functional on a certain level. But you know, if you think like we live in this global society culture, you know, we really are. I mean, you know, ever since we've been astronauts going out into space and looking back and actually seeing that we are all on this ball of rock floating in space. There's not, you know, we're all on it. It's like one vessel that we're all on. And you know, this kind of tribalism has got to be connected. You know, there's got like, I don't know, it's almost like the mycelium has got to kind of connect everything and hook it in. And you can always think of the internet is like a sort of tech mycelium or something. So the time feels really ripe for these kind of small tribal groups to keep the best of the purity that they've created, but be bold enough and courageous enough to link up with other traditions and see what happens. It's like a kind of it's like sex, you know. It's two I'm not so good on the biology and stuff, but it's two sets of genes or DNA mixing, you know, and creating something new, which is the way that we deal with diseases and viruses and things as a species. You know, it's sex is the kind of thing that throws the curveball to all the things that are trying
Yeah,
to
yeah.
kill us,
Well,
so
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
I see something similar happening, it's like I can feel this with all of these traditions coming together.
Well, it's yeah. I think that's just it. Um, and with these things, kind of where you have this sort of cross. I wouldn't say cross paradigmatic. I'd probably say cross disciplinary sort of focus. You have these mutations and so on that come out as well.
Mm.
So just like um, if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the root of mixed martial arts, and we look at mixed martial arts today, it looks completely different from its beginnings. It looks like a completely different thing.
Yeah, if you watch Conor McGregor fight, for example, he's does not what his fight does, and if you watch that, and then straight afterwards you watch the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match, like a proper, just straight Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they look totally different. But Conor
Yeah, yeah,
McGregor knows a ton about Jiu-Jitsu, and he'll play that game if he has to.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, as you say, it's a mutant form now, something new.
It's a different paradigm now,
Yeah.
and it even looks completely different to the first UFCs that were out.
Yeah, it is evolved. Yeah, so 1991 was the first one, I think. Or
Yeah,
93, no, 93, I think,
yeah.
something like that.
I
And
think about 90.
yeah, and it just keeps changing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they love it. Like change. This is another thing. Change is a good thing,
yeah, yeah.
in the eyes of that. Whereas if you're trying to keep a tradition pure, change is the last thing you want.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, so it's a very different mindset, and so there's obviously a place for it. It's like I often like to go and see sort of traditional jazz and pubs and stuff sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always, um, when I go there, like the way I see those musicians are more like they're like museum tour guides in a way.
Right.
You know? They're like they've got this very strong musicianship and skill and
Yeah.
music.
Oh, and I mean, I know we were laughing there,
Yeah, yeah,
but museums are great. I mean, we got,
yeah,
like, for example, the British Museum's got antiquities from all over the world. That was one. When I lived in London, that was the place I wanted to go.
yeah, yeah,
Let's just see this stuff. And I
yeah,
loved it. Yeah. So I mean, it's I don't want our laugh to
yeah,
suggest stupid museum stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah. So it's like so they sort of keep the tradition of jazz alive.
Mm.
But they whether I can consider them to be artists is another thing, and so on. As
Yeah,
in the
that's a
artist.
good question. Is
Yeah,
art creating something new every time?
yeah, yeah.
That's
Is it?
another podcast
That's a whole other,
conversation
yeah.
for
That's a
sure.
whole other podcast anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel some of that mentality of the artist, kind of has to be there, both to accept and reject these traditional formats in a
Yeah.
way.
Well, I mean, I want to point out to also that, as well as being a tech person, you're a musician. You play the piano beautifully, and you're great on the guitar. So it's
Yeah,
you're not just a computer geek.
yeah, yeah,
You've got this whole other artistic side. Which
yeah,
again, it's interesting that you've been playing the guitar for a long time, I know, and you've been playing the piano for maybe 10 years or something like that. And that you've almost got this instinct for this multidisciplinary thing. It's always
yeah,
made sense to do lots of things in a way.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I've got this feeling that people that are drawn to this kind of approach, if you look at their lives, they've always had a lot of things going.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Whether it will not necessarily in a conscious way.
Conscious, yeah,
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 it's
not
not
necessarily
explicit.
conscious,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so just to bring us up to date with the stories. So you'd been going to these like Vipassana salons in garden sheds and stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
felt like a little bit like the group was not happy with you bringing in other ideas. So where did that take you then? What's the next step?
Well, what ended up happening then was it was interesting. I started to try and look for integral groups. I mean, once I found out that such a thing existed,
Mm-hmm.
and so on, I decided to go and seek it out, and and I simultaneously I found two groups. One was Gary's Integral Life Practice.
So that's Gary Hawke,
Gary Hawke, yeah.
who's we both have he's our psychotherapist. We've both been working
Yeah.
with him individually
Yeah,
for many years. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so at the time, Gary Hawke, he was running this Integral Life Practice group for about, it was like 6 months at a time and so on. And I was able to kind of get onto the beginning of one of those groups early on, and it was sort of my first real proper introduction to the whole concept of therapeutic practice as a practice.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of prior to that, I kind of just thought therapeutic practice was really um, was something that was interesting. Ken spoke about it in Sex Ecology and Spirituality, but it wasn't something that I really considered as something I would do, and so
Mm-hmm.
on. At the time I was so dissociated, I didn't think I needed it.
Yeah. That was so. When I started doing psychotherapy, for most of my life, I thought psychotherapy was something that crazy people did because they were ill and they need to get better. And then I realized it's just like going to the gym. So, I mean, you get people that are out of shape physically. They go to the gym, so they're unhealthy. They go to the gym to get healthy. But then you've also got people that are in peak physical condition and they go to the gym to get even better. So it's about optimal performance for them. And so like for me, that was a big shift in my kind of understanding of what therapy was.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I got to experience like therapeutic intervention in these workshops, and Gary was doing it in an integral way. So he was kind of mixing spiritual practice with therapeutic practice, and embodied practice and voice work and drama therapy, and so there was a lot kind of going on, and so in fact, it was quite overwhelming for me, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's like, I was kind of thinking of the limits of this Vipassana group and so on. And then I come into this space and it's like,
Opposite end of the
yeah,
spectrum.
it's completely opposite
Yeah.
end.
Well, I think that's something that, I mean, this is something I want to talk to you about, and other people I interview, is when you first encountered this thing of you realize that you've got to work in all of these dimensions of yourself, your body, your heart, your mind, and your spirit. Suddenly the task ahead of you seems enormous and overwhelming, and you go to something like what Gary was doing, and I know that for him that was those are early experiments in group work in this kind of thing. And if you get all excited and you bring all of the things in at once, and it's just it's like, rather than a piece of music building up slowly, it's like you suddenly go to the mid. As soon as the song starts, it's in the middle. It's just but as time goes on and you learn to to integrate these things, and we can talk later about how that happens. This that stops
Yeah.
happening. That kind of overwhelming thing turns
Yeah.
into,
Yeah.
you know. And I think I think of it like, you know, something I've been thinking a lot about recently. Not that I've been drinking. I went through a long phase many years ago of drinking single malt whiskies, and I really love them. And you know, the ones you drink one that was a bit young, and it was just, it was kind of on your tongue, really. And then
Yeah.
you drink one that's there was one I really liked called Lagavulin, which was
Yeah. Yeah.
16 years old. And I drank one that was 25 years old once, and it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just such a different thing. It was smooth, subtle, beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's how things change over time, you know,
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
doing this stuff.
Well, that's just the thing. I mean, the sort of like the core, I kind of feel in the same way I've used the analogy that the core of mixed martial arts is sort of this Brazilian jiu-jitsu,
Hmm.
and then things sort of integrate on top of that. And I always felt that the core of integral practice was the psychotherapeutic intervention, in the sense that Ken often spoke about hierarchies of ego development and so on, and kind of how we relate to our spiritual practices based on that sort of egoic development and so on. And sort of going to these workshops, these sort of integral workshops and so on, it started to give me an embodied notion of um, of what was going on with that, like what, how does somebody develop their ego? I mean, it's quite contradictory to what a lot of spiritual practices kind of would like you to do.
You wouldn't want to take that conversation into those Vipassana
No
sheds.
way.
No.
Oh man, yeah, that would be a disaster,
Yeah.
mate. It's like a Satan has come.
Yeah. You know, so to just be clear, you know, the approach that we love is, it says meditation is really important, ego development is also really important, and they're not mutually exclusive things.
Yeah.
You know, you
Well,
can
that's
literally
the
do
thing.
both things, and they don't spoil each other.
They don't spoil each other.
Yeah.
In fact, they integrate very well with each other.
I think they potentiate each other too. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, until some of the psychotherapy, some of the work I've done with Gary, with the psychotherapy stuff, it made me realize that some of the reasons I've been meditating were, and I thought they were like lofty reasons, were
Yeah.
actually quite base. You know, so if I think of an example, like, you know, kind of wanting this oceanic bliss of deep meditation states,
Yeah.
you know, I could through working with Gary, I could actually see there was part of me. I mean, and you're kind of you're actually always doing several things at once. So it's not like the only reason why I was doing meditation was this reason. You know, there
Yeah.
were reasons why I was doing meditation, which were genuine desire to, you know, wake up,
Hmm.
and have altered states of consciousness. You know, for
Yeah.
the right reasons. But there are also parts of me that just wanted that, basically go back in my mummy's tummy, you know, in
Yeah.
there, into the womb, and experience that bliss of non-separation, not having to find my own food, not having to wipe my own bum, you know.
Yeah.
It's just you're just there, and so in a way it was like I was wanting to go back to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Part of me was wanting to go back to that rather than go forwards. You know, what's it to be a fully fledged mature adult going
Yeah.
into formless emptiness, you know,
Yeah.
versus what is it to be wanting to be a baby in that kind of
Yeah.
the womb. So that's just an example of how these two, the psychotherapy and meditation, they work, they help each other.
Well, that's just the thing. I mean, it's for me, that was also something that I had to work through with Gary as well in my own therapeutic practice. That I had gone on this after having my first like experience of just selfhood, just vanishing, just dropping. I wanted more because
Mm.
it just felt like it
Feels
felt
good.
perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect, and and so I kind of went chasing the dragon's tail with that,
Hmm.
which and then sort of building up uh, these sort of false narratives around that as well. Like, if I do these particular, if I can get into this state more and more and more and more, um, then I'm growing as an individual, and I can be healthy and then relate to other people, and
Hmm.
um, and the experiences are so powerful that even when I know intellectually that that might not be true, because at that point um I'd already read quite a number of integral books and so on that were kind of saying, this might um that there might be a chase for that oceanic experience. It might be a regression in a way, but the experiences themselves are just so beautiful and so perfect, that it's hard to imagine that you wouldn't be perfect if you were sort of always in it.
Yeah.
So,
I
um,
think one of the things that I realized at some point was that I was avoiding pain.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that just the raw pain of life. And not
yeah,
to say, life is as beautiful as it is painful,
yeah,
joyful. I mean, it's all of that. And one of the sort of traps people can get into with meditation practice is being a bliss seeker,
yeah, yeah,
because you can do it. I mean, I've done it. For a long, even many years of not realizing that I thought freedom meant not experiencing pain and just
yeah,
experiencing this bliss and joy. But
yeah,
real freedom, like, that's almost like the freedom of a child, perhaps,
yeah, yeah,
just wants the sweets but not to eat the vegetables. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
when you're a more mature adult approach is you actually want the real freedom, which is
yeah,
free to be joyful and in pain,
yeah, yeah,
but to be okay with that because you love life so much,
yeah,
through the practice.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. It was a thought I was having in the park before coming to this podcast here today.
Mm,
Um, just at some point, doing all of this practice, for me, my heart just came out and screamed, "I'm your whole experience of life, not just not just the good bits that you want and so on. I'm the whole thing." And it really screamed to me in pain
mm,
and so on. And and for me, a really, really big part of the journey, and the most important part of the journey, is integrating that pain in a way.
mm,
Um, Kind of at one notion, knowing that I'm broken, but also knowing that I'm perfect, and kind of straddling the line between these two things.
yeah, I think when you get into this stuff, paradox becomes your kind of default.
Yeah, yeah,
It's you have to be able to hold the paradox of all of these things simultaneously, um, and it feels really awkward to begin with. It's another one of these things that just over time you get okay with the paradox of life.
yeah,
You kind of, it's not, I'm not talking about like passively accepting it, and sort of
yeah,
resigning yourself to it, but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like you love the paradox. That's where the juice is.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that's that's this gorgeous craziness of life, is the paradox.
yeah,
Yeah. So we've,
yeah,
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 we've kind of come from the sort of body-based practices to sort of spiritual stuff with the meditation, and these new exciting theories that were titivating, if that's a word, your mind,
yeah, yeah.
and suddenly opening up all this new vistas, you know, in your mind. Suddenly you saw all of these new possibilities, you know, coming across
Yeah, yeah,
this you know, the integral theory by Ken Wilber's work. Not to say that Ken Wilber's not the only person doing this work. There's loads of
yeah,
people who are part of this integral movement and other things which don't have that name, you know,
yeah, yeah.
meta modernism and all sorts of
Modernism.
things, you know.
Yeah,
So, and then now you've started doing these sessions with Gary and realized that there was this whole part of you which had kind of been in the basement your whole life, you know, the
yeah.
feelings that were your heart was screaming out, now's my turn.
Well, that's the thing. It took a while to get to that point. Like the therapy was, a lot of it was spent really just trying to get to the point to be vulnerable enough to kind of even
Mm,
consider that.
yeah.
And so, and it's sort of like, it's why I think therapy, it for me, it sort of glued everything together in a way, because um without getting into that more vulnerable aspect of myself, which I was resisting so much, you
Mm,
know. um Initially I think Gary was helping me with um almost forming a language, trying to help form a language around even the whole thing of he wouldn't use the term vulnerability, but it's just easier to use. But this whole language around vulnerability, um, and at some point things just started to crack. Um, Things started to crack though when the use of psychedelics were introduced. Um,
not because of
and
Gary, to be sure.
it
It wasn't Gary that introduced
like,
you to
it was
psychedelics, just for,
really, I was
yeah.
really fortunate that Gary was around.
Oh yeah, yeah. To help, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's I was
Yeah,
very
don't
fortunate.
want to implicate him in this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you know, yeah, yeah. I was very fortunate about that, but yeah, my initial sort of thing with psychotherapy was more or less just coming into the language of that whole medium and so on.
yeah. Dipping your toe in the water.
Yeah, and kind of
So
building.
what was the first psychedelic you took?
So it was actually the first one I ever took was uh, it was some Hawaiian nut.
Oh
Um,
wow,
yeah, yeah. It was like, it's a random thing. There was a time when this stuff was legal,
right.
and so I just went to Camden with a girlfriend I had at the time, and we were both we both just decided to take this nut. We kind of researched it, thought it would be a good start, and went to the park and and had it, and it was very mild. It was a very mild experience.
Mm,
Very visual, very what's it called? Lots of thoughts kind of swirling around, a lot of kinesthesia, but nothing to really write home about, and so
yeah.
on. I think what I would really consider the first time where psychedelic really influenced me. It was the second time. I had a small amount of magic mushrooms while I was going through a migraine attack, and so
Ooh,
on.
nice.
Yeah,
Good choice. Good
yeah,
moment.
yeah. And it's strange. A friend of mine who he thought it could help, and so he gave me some mushroom tea, and you know, at that time I was having migraines like at least once a month or so. And I just thought, I'm going to try it. So tried it, and within 20 minutes, my migraine was gone.
Wow.
And within half an hour to 45 minutes, my heart just opened up.
Mm,
Like, just so much love. I never knew my heart could do that, you know. And, you know, I wasn't in love with anybody but myself, which was a new thing for me as well. Um, and I was in this body, and I was feeling those things.
mm,
And I think it was my first real moment of like, wow, like this is not what I thought. I feel really embodied now.
mm,
You know, I feel my heart, and I feel its connection to my mind, and I feel its connection to my body and my stomach, and you know, I feel all these sensations and feelings, and I can name them, and you know, navigate them, and I just felt a lot of love for myself. And so I kind of thought, oh, wow, yeah, is this what vulnerability is? You know, is is this like the little crack that needed to be opened?
mm.
Um, and so that started the beginning of a pretty wild adventure. Uh,
Oh, I talking of wild adventures and nuts and migraines. I'm not sure whether I've told you this story. When I was at boarding school, I was like, I was probably 16, and this we didn't have access to the internet or anything like this. It was all in the days of urban myths and people talking about things that they thought they knew about but didn't.
mhm.
And I mean, no, I had zero access to any information about anything. But
Yeah.
I had access to drugs. And I was a young, stupid teenage
Yeah,
boy,
yeah,
who just wanted to get in trouble, and it was such a bad mix. And but
yeah,
thank
yeah.
God I'm alive. I made it. But one of the things we did was we got some nutmegs,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and got these fresh nutmegs, ground them up, and I had what now I so I was researching this recently, it's like on the internet looking up, and I took what can be a fatal dose of nutmeg.
Nutmeg. Wow.
um
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had I think I had two whole ground nutmegs, and I think sort of between 2 to 4 can kill people before,
Yeah, yeah.
as what I was reading.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I had 2 or 3. Anyway, what my friend had told me was that 4, you can die if you have 4. So I said, okay, as long as I don't have 4, we're going to be okay. So quite a lot, and I felt like crap.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got this terrible headache. But I lay down in bed in my dormitory, and I could see this like geometric shape that was made out of primary color planes.
Mhm.
And I unfolded this shape until it was flat, and then my headache disappeared.
Wow.
And then I fell asleep and woke up a few hours later, and it was a horrible experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But just an example of you had bad drug education like you have at school,
Yeah, yeah.
plus lack of information from anywhere, surrounded by idiots that don't know anything, all egging you on.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just such a bad mix.
yeah,
And I've got sons, they're young now, but one day they're going to be, sort of like testosterone filled teenagers. And I do
yeah,
not
yeah,
want them to be in that situation.
yeah,
I want them to know the truth about
yeah,
this
yeah,
stuff, and to make, well, no one could ever get the whole truth, but I want them to be able to make good decisions,
yeah, yeah,
because I made some really bad decisions, and thank God I'm okay. But
yeah,
this is a whole big topic, that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's for sure. That's for sure. 'Cause there's not much education around it at all, and all the pitfalls you can take and so on. And if there is, there's just an overwhelming amount of information around it, so it's
It's
kind
too
of
much.
hard
I
to
think, yeah,
find.
you need places to edit all the
Yeah, yeah,
information there. I think, talking of nuts again, Professor David Nutt, is that his name?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You know,
yeah,
he's got a good podcast. It's just
yeah,
straight talk about drugs. And he's a scientist and he worked for the government. He got sacked
yeah,
because he put that controversial list of substances, and alcohol was, in his mind, more dangerous than ecstasy and LSD and magic
yeah.
mushrooms and cannabis. And he got the sack.
Yeah, you got the sack, man. You got
Yeah. The,
planted big
the,
time.
the nut
Mm.
sack. God,
Yeah, yeah.
the theme of
You
nuts
got
is
that
going too
sack.
far. Okay, so right, so you've taken your first magic mushrooms, and it's shown you this whole new interconnection. Suddenly, you saw everything was connected
Yeah,
in a way,
yeah.
and then so where are we going from there?
Well, I mean, I saw my body as an ecological system, and but not only did I see it like that, I felt it like that, and I felt myself as that, and so from there, I did what any normal person would do if they have an experience like that. I wanted more drugs,
Yeah.
you know, and so and I knew it had something to do. That experience showed me something around the heart. That there was this dimension of myself that was so locked away that, you know, I prior to that, I think I'd felt like one of those characters from The Wizard of Oz who was on a quest to look for his heart.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference between me and that character was that I I didn't even know that there was a heart to look for. And
Right.
so it was a really it was a really big eye opener in the same way of like just this drop of identity, having this all of a sudden this embodied experience, you know, of my body, my heart, my mind, all interconnected in this way. um I sort of went on this journey in a way, to become Superman in that sense. Like it, you know, like I kind of tied this whole integral thing and then this thing that informed this psychedelic thing, and thought this is really like the next step of human evolution, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, and I yeah, so I tried. I went on my psychedelic journey basically.
Yeah.
Um, and as I do, I went really far into that journey.
Yeah.
and, um, and I came right back in the search for Superman. I came right back to the beginning of the broken man.
Yeah.
And, you know, um, it was sort of after doing a really strong substance called 5-MeO-DMT, and I I had a really really beautiful and powerful experience with that. Um, that sort of just left me in this non-dual place for 1 week. I was just floating around, just thinking, you know, I've done it, or whatever, you know, and and then a week after that, um, after having that experience, I went to do Wim Hof. I went to a seminar he was doing,
Mm.
and went into an ice bath, and um, went home relaxed, and just felt my body go into complete contraction. Um, my throat closed up, my heart was just on fire. My body was started producing panic and anxiety, and just a profound sense of sadness. It was just, my heart was just pumping out all this sadness, and I didn't know what to do with that. This was like one of the most horrific things I'd ever experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the things that, from a therapeutic point of view, it's like sort of coming into contact with the emotional body. I'd already had this non-dual body. I'd had this cognitive body. The language I've been kind of building up in therapy was, well, the thing in the middle is this emotional body. It connects those two. And but having experienced this emotional body, my heart just came out and just screamed at me. And I didn't want anything to do with it.
Too much. Yeah.
I want anything to do with that. That was, it really humbled me. It really, really humbled me. Yeah, and I would say that was really the beginning of my work with Gary in my psychotherapy, and that's when we could really begin doing work that wasn't just around sort of framing language. And
I see. The image I've got is like, you know, looking for oil or something, you know, and finding these little puddles of it, you know, just, you know, you're in the right area, you know, sort of familiar. It's like somewhere around here, and then you kind of hit some extremely high pressure well that just goes, and you haven't even got the equipment to contain it. You know, it's like, go bring the lorries in and all the, it's build this. We got to do something to kind of contain this. Because it's too much. Well, you know, so 5-MeO DMT is not something I've tried personally. You know, one day, you know, it's on my bucket list, but I want to be ready. But you're never quite ready to do these things, but actually ready enough to feel like I want to do that, because you know, for those of you who might not know, you know, 5-MeO DMT is the active ingredient in this substance that comes from these toads from Central America called bufo.
Toad,
and it was only discovered in the 1980s or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 82 or 3, I think.
And so it's got no history. I mean, this is an interesting point. You know, it's got no traditional history of use that anyone's ever found. You know, going back beyond the 1980s, and it is, according to, you know, most people, the most potent psychedelic on the planet. And so, you know, it's new, it's the most potent, and it's actually quite widely available. And so, you know, so I've talked to lots of people that have tried it, and some people, they have the, you know, it's all a positive thing, and then there are other people which, you know, it is a very powerful thing, but bad things, it affects them so deeply that they're unprepared for it, and it can derail their life for quite a long time. And I know that happened with you, because, you know, we knew each other at the time when you were going through this. But there was Robert Augustus Masters, who's another person who's been associated with the integral movement. You know, it derailed his life for many years, and I think he did it way back in the 1980s or 1990s. But what's interesting about it is that it's very exciting because it is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet, but it doesn't have this long tradition of use, which has created the container, the sort of set and the setting that gets built around these different substances. So if you take ayahuasca, people have been doing that for certainly many hundreds of years, possibly thousands. I mean, we don't really know. or magic mushrooms, we know for sure that goes back many thousands of years because of some of the archaeology associated with it. So because those things have been around for such a long time, they've got this kind of traditional purity of a container, that around it. But we're also talking about integrating these pure strains into some kind of hybrid now. And I mean, and psychedelics are kind of at a point like that, where all the world's psychedelics are now available to anyone. Depending if you live in Saudi Arabia, not a good idea. You'd want to go on holiday, I think. Somewhere else. Yeah. But so, it's mixing the pure strains of these things with their own wisdom about how to do these things properly. But the Bufo or the 5-MeO DMT doesn't really have this strong tradition around it. And, maybe there's something around that because it's such a young thing, it is like the Wild West out there with this stuff.
Well, that's the thing. It's not only does it not have a strong tradition, the experience is really, it's not really a psychedelic experience.
If you have so DMT is something I've tried, and ayahuasca, and there's a very strong, just for people that might not know, there's a very strong visual component to those things.
Well, that's the thing with 5-MeO. Like the visual component is either non-existent, or it's just a white light, or it's complete emptiness. These are the three sort of categories that seem to be coming out of the experiences people are having, and so on. Very few people are having typical psychedelic experiences on them, and so on. So it's really, it's a samadhi experience. It's an experience of the Godhead in a way, of almost primordial source. And I would kind of say in that sense, there's, it doesn't feel like any psychedelic I've ever taken. And most psychedelics I've taken, they all kind of, they have something in common with each other that could make me say that's the psychedelic. With Bufo, I kind of came away thinking, that's something quite different. And the whole thing with the container around it, that's something that's sort of being addressed now. If I was to go back and do that differently, I would do it.
Okay. So let's just say, God, I'm just going to take my t-shirt off. I'm in the attic and it is swelteringly hot here. Hang on, I'm not stripping off. I do have some clothes on. So
you may not.
Let's just say someone might be listening to this and they might think, okay, wow, right, most potent psychedelic on the planet. That's so let's say some 19-year-olds is just like, they just love to push the limits. They're like, okay, 5-MeO, this sounds great, I want to blow myself open. Now, if you were to go back and do it again yourself, how would you do it again? And, how would you advise to someone, who wants to try this to do it safely, basically? We can't, we're not, this is an illegal activity. So we're not recommending someone do it, but you can't, there are people out there who want to do it. So, let's just say there are people that want to do it. How would they do it safely?
Well, first thing I'll probably say is, how will you do it more safely?
There's no, life is dangerous. There's no, we're not talking about nerfing up the world.
Especially with that. If you're doing that, you should expect to at least be in some sort of integrative process afterwards. And that's, I'm using the word integrative process in a kind way, because it can be tough for even the most developed of people. But I think it's that period after and so on. And it seems to be what I hear with a lot of people, that period after for about 2 weeks is probably a period where things just have to be really taken care of. And, you should be really walking on sacred territory.
Yes,
And
it's not
so,
go back to work on Monday morning.
yeah, nah,
Yeah.
it's like you need 2 weeks off, I think.
Yeah.
What really kind of threw me was the fact that I hadn't taken seriously how underdeveloped my emotional maturity, or not even, I wouldn't even just say maturity, my emotional capacity was.
Yeah.
Um, I
Like that structure hadn't been built inside you.
yeah,
A bit like if we think about that oil well analogy,
yeah,
you want to build the refinery first before you tap that rich seam.
yeah, yeah,
I'm going to say, infrastructure. We're not talking about like some special suit you wear. I mean, it's like,
yeah, yeah.
it's the sort of emotional structure,
Well, that's the thing,
inside you.
yeah.
Yeah.
The emotional structure, because the actual experience itself was easy.
Mm.
Like just kind of, you know, blowing up into this complete non-dual state of everything. It was very easy to let go of that from all the psychedelics I had done before, and all the kind of ice baths I was doing at that point. My nervous system was okay for that experience, the
Yeah.
spiritual component of it.
Yeah.
Um, but I had no idea what my heart was actually capable of doing in my own body from an emotional perspective. And so it's sort of hard to say, because we can speak about hindsight and we can say, well, this is what I would do before. But, at the time, I just had no clue until
Mm.
it actually happened. Now, because I think anybody doing this isn't really going to have the full picture, and if they do, then then they're not the people we need to speak to, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, it's the only advice I could really kind of say is um, is prepare to have a really, really, really intense experience, but really make space for the integration afterwards.
Yeah.
Have support, have a therapist, have people that you can trust around you. Make sure that there's nothing stressful you're doing. I would even go so far to say, don't engage in sexual activity, for at least a week or two after that. Anything where there's sort of something powerful that can affect your nervous system
Mm-hmm.
in a way. You just want to keep all of that um, the distance, and really just use that time to really integrate the experience and so on. For me, kind of running off to a Wim Hof session a week after was still in this mindset that I'm Superman.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And
uh,
I suppose there are forums, maybe Facebook pages, that you can go on, where
yeah,
people are talking about something like 5-MeO. I mean, this applies to really any psychedelics.
well, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
5-MeO is like right at the apex of it all.
yeah,
But if you're all psychedelics can be extremely powerful, and we've talked before about there's this buzzword with in the psychedelics world of integrating
yeah,
integrating the experience. And normally what's prescribed is say like after the psychedelic experience, you have sort of a series of 5 therapy sessions or something with somebody who knows about psychedelics, and they're a
Yeah.
psychotherapist. But what you're suggesting here, and we've talked about this before, is that the integration needs to really be a bit broader. So you're not just doing talk therapy. So
Yeah.
I mean, talk therapy is part of it, but
Yeah.
you need to actually do some kind of study around this too, to actually situate it within some kind of theoretical container
Well,
through
yeah.
understand what is going on, like with
Yeah.
your mind, what to expect, what's going on, and then connect with other people in a community who have been through this, what worked for them, what advice are
Yeah.
they giving, meditating as well, to be able to hold that kind of energy that happens, and maybe let some of it go and move through you. And then also
Yeah.
some physical practices, like I mean, ice baths a little bit hardcore, but lots of people might do something else which you might recommend. I mean, some
Well,
cold
yeah.
showers or something a bit more easy. But it's
Well,
it's
yeah.
the integration is all of these things.
Well, it's that whole thing. It's I think in that sense, like prior to that, and I can't say that this would have worked for 5-MeO, but I do know it works for psychedelics in general, was just embodiment practices. So not really physical practices,
Oh
but
yeah, okay,
like what is the sense of your body as it's in movement, as it's in being.
so
So I found,
that kind of ties in a little bit with the Vipassana meditation practices. You do that. A large part of that Vipassana thing is body scanning, where you go
yeah,
through your body and feel what different parts of your body
yeah,
are
what
like.
parts of your body, where you can feel parts of your body, where you can feel the heat, the warmth, the emotions running through. I would say that the whole world of embodiment, that the practices around that are very broad. I mean, I found a really good one called Feldenkrais,
Mm-hmm.
which is an Israeli practice, and it the practice itself is really just awareness in movement, and so they will integrate everything from how the eyes connect to the lower part of the hip, and how the nervous system itself, how to kind of feel the nervous system in relation to every single movement and sensation and feeling you're doing. And so they have a lot of postures. It's not really yoga. It's a kind of a in between Vipassana and yoga in a sense. So that would have been very helpful in regards to really somatically having experience to hold those emotions and so on as they came in my body. Um, but having said all of that, like the 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 things that did work. So, for instance, as I said, Gary helped a lot when that thing came on. So he would come and we would sit down and do practices and so on, that were very integral. Like they would be somatic, they would be psychotherapeutic. It would be like a workshop, but just for one person in a way.
Right.
And that really, really, really helped in the whole integration of that. I mean, I'm still integrating that experience, to be fair, but that allowed me to kind of at least process a lot of the emotional stuff that was happening. So,
And this was years ago that
yeah,
I mean, this event happened. So when you say you're
yeah,
still integrating it,
yeah,
people should expect to be integrating that experience for a long time. Most
They,
people.
I feel they should. Like, I mean, when something comes online, it doesn't go away. It's like, when you feel when you feel the wound that is your core self, part of your core self come up, you can't really ignore that anymore.
No.
It's not going to ever go away, and so on. And so in a way, you'll be integrating that for the rest of your life in that sense. I like to kind of use the word more exploring it in a way, but it's a qualitative aspect of your human condition that you didn't see prior to the event.
Yeah.
Now it's online. Awareness has shone its light on it. And, whether it's good or bad, it's not going away, and so on. And I think that's what psychedelics really do at their core, and why, when done properly, they're such an important aspect of this sort of integral model in a way, because they get at things that are really unconscious to us, and they bring it into the body, and so on, bring it into awareness, into our nervous system. And they do it in a way that I think embodiment practices or spiritual practices or even psychotherapeutic practices would struggle to do on that.
I think that's one of the things, is that, this spectrum of different practices, they access and work on kind of different things. And so meditation, this is a generalization because, some people might have these kind of experiences in meditation, but meditation doesn't generally give people these massive psychedelic experiences. I think, I've heard people who do Kundalini yoga describe sort of DMT like experiences, but I mean, it's, I don't do Kundalini yoga, so I can't speak, for myself on that. And it's like, we can end up thinking that a particular practice will do everything for us. Like, people might take up a meditation practice and think, well, meditation is going to give me these completely being blowing experiences of state experiences like psychedelics do, or someone might take up yoga and assume that they're just going to have all these meditative experiences through doing hatha yoga or something. And so, the kind of best approach, if you want to have this wide range of experiences, is to take up a wide range of practices.
Yeah. And then go through the process of figuring out how they all relate.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. So, I mean, I do want to just flag, I'd love to talk to you about the ice bath thing, because you're doing a lot of that at the moment. So, in your story, we've got to a point where you're doing meditation practices and psychedelics and cold water therapy stuff. You're still doing your jiu-jitsu and your psychotherapy. You've got a lot going on. How, I mean, the first thing to ask is, how the hell do you fit all of that into your life? Because I know, you're an entrepreneur, self-employed, setting up businesses, and you're not some trust fund kid. So, you are, earning money, living in London, paying rent, setting up businesses. You got stuff going on. How do you fit all of this stuff in?
Well, it's an interesting question. You generally always have time if you want to make it, if you're a single man.
It is true. Where there's a will, there's a way. Normally.
Where there's a will, there's a way. In that sense. Now, if I didn't if I didn't have to work, or if there was, I mean, you know, I would probably be doing a lot more, but um, I sort of feel that the challenge isn't really the time, because you can fit things in, like an ice bath. I mean, a morning practice is about an hour and a half and stuff. So if you kind of want to fit a morning practice in, you can, and then you can have an evening practice. I might do some Feldenkrais in the evening and so on. And then psychotherapy is like once a week and so on for a couple of hours. And um, for me, it's the real effort is seeing, is sort of bringing one thing into another thing. So, for instance, you know, where I've where I've really been trying to work is, for instance, before a therapeutic session, um, I really want to be in an open space, a really open space inside of myself. I kind of don't want to be really contracted and stuck in my body and so on, in a place where I might not speak properly for 2 hours and be completely resistant. Um, and I really want to bring my heart into that space. And and some of the difficulties with therapy is the vulnerability aspect, that, you know, you're kind of being asked to show truth in those sessions. And for me, that can be difficult sometimes. So one of the things, you know, like when you go and do an ice bath, um, the first thing your body does is it wants to contract and get the fuck out of there.
Hmm.
You know, it's like, you know, everything in your body is screaming, "What are you doing in here,
Yeah,
man?"
that's ancient biology coming
Yeah,
online.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty much. You
Yeah.
know, it's like all the hormones, the adrenaline, the
Mm.
cortisol is kicking in, and so, you know, like training training yourself to kind of go in there and just sit and be present with the chaos that's going on in your body while that's happening, until you kind of can get to a point where you can just be really present and then calm to that chaos. You can almost witness it
Yeah.
and
So
so
that's
on.
where the like a meditation practice
Yeah,
helps
yeah,
with the ice bath thing.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. A meditative practice will help with the ice bath.
Mm.
Um, and breathing will help. There's a few things that help with the ice bath and so on. Oxygenating your blood helps. While oxygenating your blood, being in a meditative state helps and so on. And then when you get in an ice bath, you're almost prepared for the ice bath itself and so on. But then the practice of being in the ice brings those things together, so that you can be really present.
We just had a technological glitch where
Yeah.
um, the call dropped out, but we're back.
For me, the work is not necessarily the practices per se. Um, like I say, there's enough time to fit those in, basically, if you're motivated enough to do it. And
Right.
um, it's the challenge and the time and the motivation and and that sort of part where there's fruits for discovery is literally the integration. And I find that to be, that sucks the time. That sort of keeps me thinking about this process constantly and so on. Um, you know, like for instance, if I was to do a psychotherapeutic session and so on, and what practices specifically work well just before that, and what
Yeah.
practices work well as an ongoing thing. Like an ice bath, kind of before psychotherapy, I discovered works in theory quite well, because you've just kind of gone in and you've got this, you're able to witness all this stuff happening in your body. So
Hmm.
in theory, you would think, well, when a strong emotion arises in therapy and you want to be vulnerable, create enough vulnerability around that, you can keep that presence there in the same way. So why not do an ice bath before therapy? Well, it practically, um, you know, I that I found hasn't worked so well because I'm shivering my ass off for,
Right. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
few hours and stuff.
But at least you're experimenting and
Yeah.
trying these things out, because you never
Yeah.
know. You might find
Yeah.
that winning combination. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I found more embodiment practice like Feldenkrais help a lot better during therapy. Even sometimes just half an hour of meditation can help. But then therapy is so dynamic as well. Sometimes I might want to bring more of my heart center. Sometimes I might want to bring more of a cognitive space. I might want to understand something a bit more.
Hmm.
Um, so the integration is in the same territory in that sense as this mixed martial arts thing. It's, you look at the evolution of that particular system of engagement, and it's far from done. People are still evolving. The game has not come to an end yet. And
The internet connection dropped out here, but Donald was just saying that, in his opinion, spiritual practice is now at the same place that mixed martial arts was in the 1990s.
the only game in town seems to be sort of integral practice, or metamodernism, or it's and that's a very niche sort of thing. It's not really yet a widespread thing.
Mm.
It's sort of just like freaks like us who are sort of,
Well, it's all quite new.
yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
unfortunately, the Wi-Fi connection's not very good,
yeah, yeah,
and so I feel like we should. I mean, we've been going for like 2 hours too.
yeah,
We should kind of wrap this up.
yeah,
And I mean, I would love to talk to you another time,
yeah,
explore
yeah,
some other areas, because you're a fascinating guy, and you've got an experimental approach to your own life and your life in community with others. I mean, the stuff we didn't touch on is, we've done retreats together, where we did this sort of integral life practice together, and you're actively engaged with different communities around the world, through the internet and then in person in London. Do you have any work you want to share with the world, or is there anything you want to point people to, in
well,
particular?
yeah, I mean, as you know, we were trying to operate a business in London called Float Effect. We have a partial website up.
We
Due to
didn't.
the
This
whole,
is another area we didn't touch on,
yeah,
but
yeah,
flotation tanks,
yeah,
sensory
flotation,
deprivation, floating,
yeah, yeah,
another amazing practice. We'll have to talk
yeah, yeah,
about that another time. But this is
another
the
time.
business you're setting up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So due to the whole Corona thing, that's going to be delayed and stuff. But there's a website that's coming up called floateffect.co.uk, and the whole emphasis on that. This is something for another conversation.
Mm.
It's the use of altered states, getting into altered states, and using music as almost a shamanic guide, but not necessarily shamanic music, just music, everything from classical music all the way up to jazz and rock, and in these really beautiful playlists and so on, and using music to guide you in while you're in deep altered or psychedelic states and so on. That's part of what the business is about. And but that's a whole other conversation and a whole other area that I think is completely brand new.
Yeah.
It's
And I mean, thinking of the sort of body, heart, mind, spirit thing, floating, I mean, all of these practices kind of spread across these domains of ourselves, but
yeah, yeah,
floating really does all of those all in one.
yeah, yeah.
It's just an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's an amazing practice, and there's a lot of scope for trying new things out, and yeah. but yeah, we're working on that business currently. As I say, there's something up at the moment, not complete, but floateffect.co.uk.
Well, it's always great to connect with you, Donald. You know, you're
Yeah,
someone I
yeah,
love dearly, and I value your friendship so much. And you know, we're both people that have been doing these kind of practices for a long time, and
long
we've
time.
kind of connected around it. And there's nothing like having buddies along the journey. You know, it is
Yeah, yeah.
key. You do not want to do this stuff on your own. You know,
No way.
yeah, yeah,
No
it's
way.
so key to
Yeah,
connect with
yeah,
other people and have develop some strong friendships, you know,
yeah,
people you know, they keep you on track.
yeah,
um
yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
lots of
And
love, and you know, we'll do another conversation another time,
oh, that would be great.
and
And
I
thank
will
you for
make
inviting me on this one.
pleasure.
It's an honor
Yeah,
to be the first guy here speaking and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to another one whenever that happens and so on.
yeah. Cool. Well,
Cool.
thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing you know, your personal journey with this
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
practice, and
yeah.
it's been really interesting. Lots of stuff I haven't heard you say before, so it's really
Yeah.
cool. All right, well, a deep
Okay.
bow and lots of love, and I'll
Yeah.
see you soon.
See you soon. Have a
Thanks,
good one.
Donald.
Bye
Bye.
bye.